I play a little bit.
Do you?
I could check your left hand.
I know. I'm not going to deny it.
Do 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 do. It's the Boris Dirk podcast. Draft season is upon us. We figured you might be a little bit tired of hearing in words what you watched on screen in the finals. So we're taking a full episode break from the finals. Be back soon. But today, we wanted to attack the mainstream draft community. Because if you're listening to this, Sam Vecini, I think you and your colleagues can be a bunch of sheep. In 2022, Jalen Williams was picked 12. I think Max had him at 6 on Max's board. I had him at 10. I'm so mad the Thunder went that high for him because it looked like we were way ahead of Mox. In 2020, Tyrese Halliburton went 12. I think I'd rather have him than Anthony Edwards right now. That's how high I'm on Halliburton. So you could argue last year, Jalen Williams was the best player in the draft. In 2020, Halliburton might have been the best player in the draft. And in 2018, another guy we had tons of information on, a Slovenian man playing in Madrid by the name of Luka Doncic, somehow went third. So a lot of people in the draft community had Luka 1, but nobody had Jalen Williams in their top 6 except Max. He was outside the top 10 in every mock I saw, and on every big board I saw. So we've decided to free ourselves from the chains of draft convention. We're in a sensory deprivation tank where we develop our feelings about players with no regard for what people who make money to do this are saying. But we're going to talk about the craziest thoughts we have about guys in relation to what the consensus seems to be. Max, the time has come.
Yes, the draft is rapidly approaching. It is on June 22nd, which is 16 days from now. And I've been going through, grinding tape, doing the same process I did last year, which is now my second year of really diving into draft coverage and formulating my own opinions as opposed to just digesting the opinions of other people. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You all get to digest our opinions, but I wanted to formulate my own. Hopefully I have another hit like Jalen Williams at 6 this year, and hopefully I learned from my mistake of putting Johnny Davis at 9.
In the words of Serge Ibaka, how hungry are you?
Oh, well, I did just eat a homemade burrito bowl, but aside from that, I am hungry for draft coverage, and I must agree with you. When I first started evaluating the guys in this draft, my first instinct was after Wembanyama, Scoot, and Brandon Miller, I like this draft a lot less than I liked last year's draft once you get past the top 3. The more I've looked at it, the more I feel like it probably won't be a bad draft in retrospect. I think people just have no idea who's going to be good out of it once you get past the first handful of guys. And that's what astounds me about how similar all these big boards are to each other, because you'll see a pretty consensus top 10 out there. And I feel like once you get past 4 or 5, there's not that much that separates these guys. There's a lot of high upside, low floor project young wings who either it's a question of whether they'll be able to shoot, or it's a question of whether they know how to play basketball, but they can shoot, or they can play basketball, but they can't defend, or they can defend, but they can't shoot. There's a lot of guys like that. Then you have a lot of sort of steady guys who've been in college for a few years, look like they'll step into the NBA as role players, and you don't know when you want to pick them relative to the more project type guys. But in any case, I think this draft is much more of a crapshoot than last year's draft was, and that's why it surprises me so much that you see so much consensus in the big boards out there. Because I don't see that much difference between I'm not very high on Jarris Walker, who most people have going 5th, who's this big wing, or maybe I would say more of a big man. I would say a small big man. Most people see him as a big wing out of Houston. Everyone's got him 5th on their board, and I'm not sure he can play basketball. So I feel like I can't be the only person that thinks that, and yet everyone seems to have him at 5th on their board. My mind's going a mile a minute. You go.
I see him more often like between 7 and 11 for the record, but yeah, you're definitely way lower on him than consensus. Let's start with the good stuff because it's more fun to be positive about amazing basketball players.
Of course.
Tell me a guy who on your list would be asterisked as a guy that you're way higher on than the mocks that you see when you go online.
So I know we both have a soft spot for this guy. I'm not sure whether I love him or I don't love him quite as much as I loved Jalen Williams last year, but he might be my EJ Liddell this year, who for anyone who was listening last year, EJ Liddell was a power forward out of Ohio State. I was very high on him. I had him in my top 12, I think, or 10. He ended up getting picked in the second round and then tearing his ACL in summer league. So we still don't know how good he is. He's in New Orleans. Hopefully he has a chance to prove me right. But I'm going to start with CD Sissoko, who most of our listeners probably haven't heard of. He was Scoot Henderson's much less heralded teammate on the G League Ignite this year. Most mock drafts have him going somewhere in the 20s, late first round. And I think he's a lottery pick. I think he's a good defender. I think he's a really good passer. He kind of reminds me of Boris Diaw with some of the passes that he throws. The first play I ever watched of him, he caught a pass in the corner and immediately whipped a behind the back pass to the big man under the rim, which was very impressive. He's got some off the dribble game, and I think he's going to be a really high level defender too. Drew, I know you like him as well. I kind of look at him as a Boris Diaw, Lamar Odom type of player. But what do you see with him?
Yeah, he has a lot of power. He played his full season this year for the G League Ignite at 18 years old. He was second in the league in dunks, 6'6" without shoes. So he's really 6'7" in NBA terms, but he's got really long arms and he has the standing reach of an NBA 4. Like CD Sissoko and Jarris Walker have the same standing reach. When they put their hands in the air, they can contest the same height of shot release. CD, I agree with you. He averaged 3.5 assists this year as an 18-year-old playing against pros. One of the things that we're going to come back to over and over again on this podcast is like the hell of draft evaluations is making sense of the statistics that guys produce in a small period of time. And the G League Ignite is a higher level of competition than even top college basketball. These are pros. These are former college stars. You guys will recognize a lot of the names on the G League Ignite team and the vets that guys like Scoot Henderson and CD Sissoko and Leonard Miller are competing against in the G League. But there's no real importance to winning. And if there's anything the Heat have proven to us in this postseason, it's like we got to get as good as the Heat are at identifying competitive spirit. And so I think it's difficult to do that with these guys in the G League. It's difficult to do it with the Thompson twins who played this year for Overtime Elite. We'll talk about that. It's really fun to watch guys like Wembanyama and his teammate for Mets, Bilal Coulibaly, who are playing for something, right? Like they're about to play in the top tier French basketball, the title game for that league. But here we are in the G League talking about CD Sissoko, whom I also love. And I have CD Sissoko at number 7 on my board. I know you don't want to know that.
Oh my God.
What do you have, Matt?
That's higher than I have him.
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
I have him at 10.
I gotta say, you were early to identify Jalen Williams as a visionary passer. This is a weak passing draft. Like there aren't a lot of guys that have like the live dribble passing feel that we saw from even Paolo had it last year. Like Paolo in flashes was a really special passer. We saw that during his rookie year. But CD is a really, really good passer. He's one of the better guys in this class at changing speeds, has the body of a defensive end. He loves to get downhill. Like I said, second in the G League in dunks, which is absurd. He's a guard / forward. And the reason I'm comfortable having him at 7 is I really believe in his shot long term. And I might be overreacting to the videos I've seen of his workouts with pro teams. Like I watched every second the Blazers posted on social media of his workout, and his shot looks even cleaner than it did in the G League, where he shot 30% from 3 this year, and it wasn't always great. But I think he's simplified things. He has a decently high release. gets good elevation, and he's confident as hell. And there's something really intriguing to me about an 18-year-old against the top prospects our country has to offer. At one point during the G League season, I think Scoot might have been injured, but CD scored 20 points in 5 straight games, flashed the passing, got to the line a lot, finished with authority. I think he's a decent rebounder. I think he could be a slightly better rebounder for his physical gifts, but long, thick, and really, really smart for a wing of his age.
Yes. And I think he'll be able to play the 3 or the 4, perhaps even a small ball 5 in some units. Yeah, and we don't have to spend too much time on him, but in general, also another thing with the draft and why I think it's getting more important is when the new CBA kicks in, and there's been a little bit more coverage about this recently, but teams are going to be very limited in the ways that they can add players who aren't already on their team. So it's going to make drafting guys who you want to keep long term very important. And I don't know if you can say the draft is an inefficiency because people already place a lot of emphasis on it if you're not the Phoenix Suns. But going forward, it's just going to become more and more important. Anyways, can you give me one of your guys who you have much higher than consensus, not named CD Sissoko?
Yeah. But the last thing I just want to say about CD is that I wrote down for comms Josh Hart and Miles Bridges' body. And we barely touched his defense, but he's a really strong defender who has all the tools and cares.
Yes. And off ball, I think he's going to be really good to elite.
Yeah.
On ball, he can struggle sometimes to guard quicker guys, but I think he's got potential to be an on ball stopper sort of guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, defense and passing are his 2 calling cards, I think, and intelligence.
A guy that I know will not be picked in the top 4, but I currently have him at number 4, is Anthony Black of Arkansas. 6'7", point guard. This is a guy who basically does every single thing on the floor except shoot 3 as well. And I've been complaining to you about the tyranny of the 3-point line because there are several guys in this draft that are such intelligent, well-rounded basketball players, but they struggle to make shots from 3. And for that reason alone, we have to be concerned that they might get played out of a playoff series. I know you do this too. Like when I'm evaluating guys for the draft, I'm evaluating them for the playoffs.
Yep.
And guys on the Heat have been able to stay on the floor because they don't lose confidence in their 3-point shot and they defend. Anthony Black, in my opinion, is the best perimeter defender in this draft. I watched him harass ball handlers all year in the SEC. He gets there as a freshman this year, Arkansas, behind Nick Smith Jr., a guy we'll talk about eventually, who was like a top 3 recruit in their class. Nick Smith was considered the 5-star face of this Arkansas recruiting class, but he just didn't have it in year 1. He had a very inefficient season. He struggled with his decision-making. He couldn't hit jump shots, and it got dark for Nick Smith. And for that reason, he's not going to be picked in the lottery, I don't think. Anthony Black completely took over the team, ran the show for them. Amazing passing feel. I call him a bouncy Derek White because he has great touch around the rim, but he has a 39-inch vert, which he registered at the combine this year. He plays strong. He does try to dunk it on you. He has a really strong runner, a really good floater, and he makes all the right passes, like pick and roll aficionado, team first guy. If there's any fear I have about Anthony Black, it's that his superstar ceiling just isn't there because he has a set jumper that he struggles to shoot off movement. He had some bad misses when he was wide open this year. But I've also heard countless people in the NBA community that I really respect say that he's like one of the best intangibles guys, prospects in a while. Yeah. And that makes complete sense to me. He has the 2nd best free throw rate of any of the prospects in this draft. Number 1 is a guy I'm going to talk about soon. Anthony Black had like a 56% free throw rate. He got to the line at an amazing clip. Like he forced the issue on 20-something-year-old men as an 18-year-old freshman. And I really hope the shot comes, because if he can just become respectable, sort of like Drew Holiday from behind the 3-point line, it's going to open up all of the other tools he has on offense, because he can get into the lane. I think he's really special. He is a guy that can run your offense, ideally alongside like a really pure wing scorer. Like, I don't think he's going to be your scoring leader, but I think he could be the best player on a team where he doesn't lead the team in scoring. Really, what I see from him is like, if everything goes right, he has some Tony Parker-esque qualities, but he's 6'7". I think people are really underrating Anthony Black's touch around the rim. Unfortunately, the 3-point line matters way too much to the spacing and tempo of today's NBA.
Yeah. I'm, I guess, fairly in line with the consensus on Anthony Black. I've got him at 7 or 8 on my board at the moment. I agree. I think he's probably the best passer in the draft. If not, he's in the handful at the very top. I see him as very Lonzo Ball-ish, minus the injury concerns, but big. He's 6'7", 200 pounds as a point guard. That's really high level. Absolute dog on defense, especially on the ball, and off the ball. He's really disruptive as well. He's a good rebounder for a point guard. One of, if not the smartest guys in this draft. The shooting's a big concern, and I think not just the shooting. I think sort of he doesn't really have a scoring mentality, which you don't necessarily need to be a point guard. In fact, back in the day, that would be considered a bad thing if you were a point guard to have a scoring mentality. But I do question a little bit if he'll ever be more than like a really good role player when he's not sort of looking to score all the time. And I don't have a great feeling about his sort of mid-range game as well as his 3-point game. I think he's good around the basket, but I think his offensive game will mostly be passing and then cutting and trying to make things happen off of rebounds. So I really like him. I'm naturally drawn to these sort of visionary passer type of prospects. But yeah, I find the shooting and scoring a little, just to cap his ceiling really below that all-star upside, which to me puts him down in like the 7-8 range in this draft. But yeah, my comps for him were Lonzo Ball, Derek White, a young, when we thought Ben Simmons was good, that player, but a little bit smaller and more intense, a higher motor. Obviously, nothing like the current version of Ben Simmons, but that's kind of the prototype we're looking at. I think Lonzo Ball is probably the best comparison.
I think he's more dynamic on the ball than Lonzo. I think without the ball, he doesn't have Lonzo's catch and shoot upside, at least right now. It doesn't look like, but he's a good cutter, like a really heady player. I don't think that he's the kind of guy who becomes unplayable because when he doesn't have the ball, he can't offer you anything on offense. Forget the 3-point shooting. I'd love to see him develop more of like a back down bully ball, Jamal Murray sort of mid-range post game. Because of that touch he shows around the rim, I think it's possible. I feel like this is a guy who's part of a title winning core. Like, that's how much I believe in his competitive spirit.
Yep. So this guy's a little bit more of a household name just because of what happened in the tournament. But I really like Jordan Hawkins from UConn. We've been talking about the importance of shooting. He obviously had a big showcase for it during the March Madness tournament, all the way to winning the final, and I believe being named most outstanding player of the Final Four, though I'm not positive.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the best shooter in the draft. A lot of people might point to Grady Dick, who I think is also a very good shooter, but Hawkins just has a way of just never stopping moving, and he flies around screens all game long. The entire offense was based around him, just endless motion around screens, off the ball, through the lane, back out, relocation threes, all that stuff. And he has one of those shots where I don't think he even made the first couple shots I saw him take, but I just saw him shoot and I was like, yeah, that guy's a shooter. He just has an effortless release, the perfect level of elevation. He gets it off so quick. He's going to have one of the quicker releases in the NBA when he comes in. I see him as kind of a Kevin Huerter type of prospect. And we saw how much Kevin Herter's shooting ability, and especially off of movement, because that's a big distinction, being able to shoot off movement versus just sitting in the corner and shooting. That's what makes the difference between someone like Klay Thompson, Kevin Herter, JJ Redick versus someone like, PJ Tucker standing in the corner, or even a better shooter. But if you're just a stationary shooter, it's different.
Yeah,
And
Jay Crowder maybe.
Jay Crowder, exactly. He's gonna struggle on defense. He'll probably get hunted. I think off the ball and team concepts, he's fine because he's a smart player. On the ball, he's a little bit small. He's 6'5", so he'd be a guard, not a wing. But we've been talking about the importance of shooting, how guys on Miami have just been able to survive by hitting shots and being disciplined in the team concept on defense. And I think he can certainly do that. And I think the shooting upside is just really, really high level in the variety of ways that he's able to get shots off.
He's an awesome player. I think I'm more around consensus on Jordan Hawkins just because I worry about the diversity of his offensive game. Like, he has arguably the most important off-ball skill you can have for today's league. Hit the floor is so high, but there are some guys I have in that range of the first round where I would just rather swing on the upside. I think he's a decent defender. Like, he really cares, but he's thin. Like, he's got to be under 200 pounds. He's 21 years old. He's a sophomore. He might be closer to Landry Shamet than like one of the movement shooters that offers enough on the other end that they're like integral to a team's title hopes.
Yeah, that's my low end comp for him, is Landry Shamet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had as my 3 comps Kevin Herter, Malik Beasley, and Landry Shamet. That was before Malik Beasley had the really bad playoffs that he had. But I think he's not going to be worse than Malik Beasley. I think he's a better shooter than Malik Beasley. He's smarter, and he's got all the motion stuff as well. He's not someone I would take as sort of a young developing team, but if I'm a team that's trying to contend, I don't know if there's any contenders that have lottery picks. I guess Dallas has the 10th pick, but if someone wanted to trade into that 10th pick and take him as a shooter, I think that would be a good spot. I mentioned Grady Dick. I have Grady higher than him by a couple spots, but I have him in the same tier, that tier of 3, which is sort of the end of my top 10 of Grady Dick, Sidy Cissoko, and Jordan Hawkins. It's sort of 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
So I think depending on what team you have, there's an argument to be made for any of those guys. Grady's got more of a well-rounded game as far as being bigger, being a little bit more athletic, having more upside sort of physically. But just in terms of pure shooting, I think Hawkins is the best shooter in the draft. And I feel like those guys rarely don't work out. Like, usually the best shooter in the draft ends up being a useful NBA player. And if you're picking between 10 and 15 and you're a couple pieces away from being a really good team, I don't think you should turn your nose up at a good NBA player.
Yeah, I hear you. It's just his strength on defense, and on offense, what happens when you make him dribble. And in the finals right now, there just aren't many guys under 200 pounds. Like, even Gabe Vincent, shorter guy, but he's thick, and he's not an automatic switch because he has that strength and that strong base. But yeah, really polished, amazing shooter to watch. An artist.
And if he falls to the Lakers at 17, that would be a great pick for them to sort of shore up that shooting and what they thought they were getting with Malik Beasley.
Number 14 on my board is Julian Phillips of Tennessee. I don't see Julian Phillips in anyone's top 20. I think he's just starting to scratch like first round, like top 30s on people's big boards. Julian Phillips had the best standing and running vert in the combine, which was crazy because he jumped 43.5 inches, which is absurd. He's 6'8". He's wiry, strong, 6'11" wingspan. I think his college stats are very misleading. This year at Tennessee, 24% from three, but he had a hip injury in February where his stats completely tailed off. And by all accounts, it's not a serious injury, but his minutes were like cut in half. He went from starting and leading one of the best defenses in the country, I think statistically the best defense in the country, to coming off the bench in the NCAA tournament and in some of the later games for the Vols. This guy, worst case, at 14, you're getting a really strong wing defender. Extremely intense. Again, the combine backed up the fact that he has insane explosiveness, and I think it does pop on his tape. He shot 38% his senior year on the EYBL circuit against the best players in his class, and his shot is not broken. I think he lost confidence. One of the things I actually like about him is that he wasn't making threes early in his freshman season, and he stopped taking them and just started getting to the rim. Mm-hmm. He has the number one free throw rate in this class. Okay, because of the injury, he ended up only playing 24 minutes a game his freshman year, but he got to the line 3.7 times per game and made 82% of his free throw attempts. It's controversial whether free throw percentage is the safest indicator of shooting touch, future three-point shooting, but I think that's important. He knocked down important free throws for a really good team with confidence. I've read and heard on podcasts that he changed his shooting mechanics. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen a lot of his high school tape. Apparently he made some dumb changes to his jumper for his year in college. But I think this guy is like a complete lock as a good wing defender. And I believe enough in the shooting and the slashing ability that I would love to swing on his upside and hope that this was a really bad sample of three-point shooting.
Yeah. So I haven't really dived deep into him yet. I've watched one game of his where they played South Carolina. He did a good job on Gigi Jackson and they won the game by 40. So I'm not sure exactly how much to take away from that, other than the fact that Gigi Jackson's not a winning player and he's very close to the bottom of my big board, but we would have to spend a lot of time on him. But I'm interested to dive more into Phillips. He definitely looks extremely athletic. Good frame. So I trust that he'll be a good defender as well. Can I give you another guy quickly?
No.
It's all in the name. Maxwell Lewis, 6'7", 195 wing from Pepperdine. This guy, I was talking about Jordan Hawkins and how when I saw him shoot the first time, I was like, oh, this guy's a shooter. I had a similar feeling when I saw Maxwell Lewis shoot for the first time. He reminds me a lot of Trey Murphy, who took a really big step this year into becoming a high-level starter in the NBA, or he's on his way to becoming a high-level starter in the NBA. Good shooter, really lengthy. I thought on tape he looked pretty athletic, although his measurements at the combine weren't fantastic in terms of his speed and his jumping. But I thought on tape he looked like he could run fast and jump high. But aside from that, he's long. He's got a lightning quick, silky shooting stroke. And I think has shown some flashes of all around offensive skill in terms of pull-ups, being able to handle pretty well for his size, finishing around the basket. I think he's got potential as an on-ball defender. He's definitely got some issues in terms of turnovers and discipline. Not to the level of someone like the aforementioned Gigi Jackson, where I think it can't be coached out of him. I think he was playing a very freewheeling style, and some of his efficiency and ball security stuff suffered from that. But I think he's going to be a really good shooter. And at 6'7", 200 pounds with, I think, a pretty good athletic frame and I think a pretty good head on his shoulders, although I haven't seen any of the kind of interview type stuff. I personally just don't see very much difference between him and some of the other wings that get thrown about at the end of the lottery, whether that's Taylor Hendricks. Some people have Gigi Jackson in that 10 to 20 range. Jarris Walker, we mentioned before. And we talked about the importance of shooting. I think he's going to be a really good shooter. I think if everything hits, there's some Chris Middleton in him. But sort of the median outcome that I would expect is more of a Trey Murphy type of player. But hey, if the discipline never comes around and he's really just kind of a freewheeling gunner, there's Cam Reddish possibility, who's always the floor comp for a lot of these wing prospects.
These sirens.
But I do like him, and I've got him towards the end of the lottery in that 12 to 16 range.
Totally agree on Max Lewis as a shooter. This is sort of a stubborn position that I don't feel great about. And some of our data-driven listeners are going to hear this and be like, Drew needs to start bringing math into the equation, or I'm going to stop fucking listening to the Boris Dirk podcast. But Pepperdine was 9-22 this year in the West Coast Conference. They fucking sucked. Okay.
Yes.
That was aggressive. Okay. There are human beings on that team. I already regret saying that, but they were really bad compared to their competition. When I look at some of the mid-major, low-major guys that really popped in the NBA, two of them are Blazer legends. Weber State was 25-7 Dame's junior year, 30-7 his senior year. Like they made the tournament one of those years. They had a talent on their side. It was so far ahead of anyone else in the league. They couldn't help but win. Max Lewis, he's playing on his own island. You know, he isn't making guys better. It wasn't his job to facilitate Pepperdine's offense. But CJ McCollum's Lehigh team went to the tournament, beat Austin Rivers' Duke team. So these mid-major guys, forget winning a game in the tournament. Just get to 500 in a league with guys where very, very few people you run into are even scratching an NBA floor.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that worries me about Max Lewis. And then I go to his interviews, because YouTube interviews matter a lot to me. I don't like the way Max Lewis talks about being at the NBA Combine, working out at teams' facilities with high major guys, you know, top guys from his class when he was overlooked as a recruit. There's a lot of I'm just happy to be here. What a blessing it is to be here and have a chance to compete against guys my age. I don't like it at all. Seems a little bit too nice to me.
That's fair. That's possible. I haven't watched any of his interviews. I grind tape and excrete analysis. So
yeah,
I don't have anything to say on his interviews, but my personal feeling is if you're going to be taking chances on these project wings, you might as well take the one who we know can shoot. And that's my view on Lewis.
We're going to finish this off with a nice little UCLA duet.
Yes.
Because UCLA had two players, one freshman, one senior, that you and I respectively love. Okay, the guy that I love on UCLA, we'll do him first, is freshman Amari Bailey. Played at Sierra Canyon with Bronny. I'm not sure he finished his high school career at Sierra Canyon, but you've probably watched him in those YouTube videos. It was him, Bronny, Zaire Williams when he was the elder statesman. Amari Bailey was like a consensus top 5, top 7 guy in his high school class. He was wild as a freshman. He's unpolished. He is a lefty 6'4" combo guard who is really athletic and really long. So he has like a 6'10" wingspan, really cares on defense. And the reason I have him at 24, which seems to be completely dissonant from the draft community, is I think at the very least you can fall back on Amari Bailey's defense. And so in brackets next time I wrote Jalen Suggs. I was way more optimistic about Jalen Suggs' offense at Gonzaga, but defense has been what's made Jalen Suggs an asset early in his career. So I think he's going to be able to guard wings. And he's a little bit rough around the edges as a defender, but I know he cares and I know he has great physical tools. On offense, very left-hand dominant. His right hand is his weakness. He'll dribble himself into trouble. Some head-scratching freshman decisions. But he still managed to shoot decently efficiently from 3. And so a bet on Amari Bailey is a bet on his long-term three-point potential. This is a guy who put pressure on the rim and defended at a high level in the Pac-12, which has gotten a lot stronger. Another guy where I'm betting a little bit on his high school pedigree. He went on to a UCLA team with a history of winning at the highest level and a lot of upperclassmen that deserved minutes. He could have signed on to go somewhere like USC, somewhere with less talent, and been the star of the show. He has great body. He has really good body control. He can stop on a dime, and his touch from mid-range is what gives me hope for his long-term shooting ability.
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble evaluating Amari Bailey because as a player, he's just a lot of flashes in general and not much that you can really kind of grab onto and bank on. I don't think he has any one like skill that I would like say this is going to be what he
Yeah.
does in the NBA. He flashes, spot up threes, mid-range pull-ups, defense, handle, passing sometimes, but
Wiggle.
not wiggle, but nothing to the point where I'm like, okay, that's a bankable NBA
Yeah.
skill. So that's why I had trouble with him. Where's the consensus on him? Like, do most people think he's a second round pick?
I've seen him in the 40s on Adam Spinella's board, on Sam Vecini's board. Like I haven't seen him above top 40 on anyone's list.
Well, I guess I haven't gotten through 40 guys yet. He's towards the bottom of my board, but not like at the bottom. So he could be a little above consensus for me. I wonder if Josh Richardson maybe is like a decent comp for him, as someone who's got a little bit of ball handling juice, kind of a supporting player.
Yeah.
3-point shot comes and goes. His mid-range game gave me some like Alec Burks kind of
Yeah.
vibes, with his ability to get to his spots in the mid-range and hit from there. Maybe Karis LeVert, but he's a lot more intense and a better defender than Karis LeVert is. I love his length. I like his intensity. I think he's got some scoring upside, but in general, I put him behind guys who had real bankable skills that I thought I could bet on.
Yeah.
But I can see how through a certain lens, you could really like him.
On paper, he reminds me a little bit of Talen Horton-Tucker, like a guy who wasn't tremendously efficient in college, but was deceptively long, like had flashes that were like incredibly auspicious, like things that Anthony Black can't do, like Amari Bailey can make look easy just because he's a really high level athlete. And if you could get a guy like that in the 20s.
Can I talk about Jaime? Jaime Jaquez, he's been at UCLA for 4 years. He's 6'7", about 230, although he's a small 6'7" because he's got short arms. So in practice, he's more like a 6'5" or 6'6", sort of in the flow of a game. But he just does so much stuff. Like he just does shit. I have so many notes on him from his games.
We should just end it there.
Every game I have of his, I have over a page of notes, just like, oh, good screen, good rebound, good cut, way to find the cutter. Oh, he toasted a guy in the post for a little fadeaway. He hit a little mid-range pull-up. He hit a spot up three. I just think he's so smart. He's strong. He's physical. He's a good post player, which like there's not that much room for sort of guards and wings to post up in the NBA nowadays, but you see it from time to time. He gives me some Austin Reeves vibes with sort of his craftiness and his ability to change pace, kind of cook guys off the dribble and get to the basket. He does have some issues with finishing against length and sort of being explosive, but he can also be crafty to generate space for himself in a way similar to Austin Reeves. He's got a little Dante DiVincenzo to him, but bigger. A little Kyle Anderson to him as well. And I just think in terms of bankable NBA skills, there's rebounding, there's IQ. I think his mid-range scoring is really good. I think he can draw fouls. I think he can post up against smaller players. And then, what determines whether he'll be a real high level, starter or role player will ultimately be his shooting. I have some belief that he'll be able to be a good shooter off the catch. He'll never be like a pull-up threat from three. In the mid-range, his touch looks really good, and he makes occasional spot-up threes, but you just don't see him take very many of them.
Yeah.
But I think just someone of his IQ, intensity, craftiness, and defensive activity level, he's not going to be bad. Like, he's at least going to be a rotation player. And I think that's someone who you take in the back half of the first round. I don't think that that's a second-round player, which is where a lot of people have him going.
Dante DiVincenzo had a similar T-Rex body, like shorter arms than height, and I think it hurt him during his draft process.
Mm-hmm.
But Dante DiVincenzo's rebounding translated to the NBA. I also, again, I talked about with Julian Phillips how I kind of like that, like if you're not making threes, but you have so many other offensive tools, don't take a lot of threes. And
Mhm.
Hawkes has never been a high volume 3-point guy. Somehow he shot 39% as a sophomore when he was taking 3 a game. He's a guy that you need to evaluate in the context of his winning pedigree. Because
Yes.
when I first looked at him, outside the context of all of UCLA's success, I texted you that he was going to be the DeMar DeRozan of Israel on offense. But he's so adaptable, and he played with
Yes.
a lot of different guys in his college career, and he got better and better. Like every year he added something. He got
Mhm.
better and better as a rebounder. He got more and more diverse mid-range scorer. He sets tough screens. He gets steals. Like he forces turnovers. He isn't just like a stay in front of you guy. He actually has great hands.
Yes.
And so there's no way he doesn't stick in the NBA. Like
Yeah.
at the very least, he's like a Nick Collison on your bench. I just think that's
Mhm.
how much respect I have for him as a basketball thinker. And
Yep.
he's a guy I would love the Blazers to have. I just don't want them taking him in the top 20
Yeah.
because his 3-point shooting scares me a little bit.
Yeah. I've got him at 16 currently, but there's a few guys above him in consensus I haven't evaluated yet. So
Yeah.
he might end up sliding back towards 18, 19, or 20 for me. But yeah, just his intelligence, his give a shit factor,
Yeah.
his well-roundedness, I think, yeah, will be too much to have him wash out of the NBA. And if I'm a contender picking in that, 20 to 25 range, certainly, or 20 to 30 range, certainly I'd be looking at him. But even, in the late teens, I'd be looking at him if he fits what I do.
Last thing. You mentioned give a shit factor. That is the first thing that I care about evaluating guys in this draft. I'm just done with a lot of the other shit. I'm done with the glitz and the glamour. I'm done with GG Jackson from South Carolina. Did you see like that step back 3 he hit against Alabama in Brandon Miller's face? Every single guy that we talked about today on both of our sides has a great give a shit factor.
Yes.
And
Except maybe Max Lewis.
Except Max Lewis, whom you actually said, and I think you misspoke. You said his median outcome is Trey Murphy?
I guess not median. I
Because
think like
Trey
not
Murphy,
median.
Trey Murphy went 17 in 2021. And I've said it multiple times on this podcast. I think Trey Murphy is going to be an all-star. And if he's not an all-star, he's like that incredible sort of starter who doesn't get the counting stats to be an all-star, but is better than a couple all-stars.
Yeah, what I said median, I meant like sort of like a reasonable good outcome. But anyway, semantics, carry on.
Okay, then fucking put Max Lewis in your top 11.
He's close.
Guys, it's a complicated world. It's a lonely, isolating, late-stage capitalistic world. And we're going to keep draft content coming at you. We'll be back with stuff on the finals, I'm sure. But I honestly have more fun doing this.
Yes. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Long live Jeremy Sohan.